everybody, happy Monday. We are back for the wine adventures. A quick apology for those of you who are expecting this week in an Ear4j article review. I just realised I broke something on the meetup page, so I'll get that sorted and fixed, but we'll be back next week. Anyway, welcome. So, what are we going to be doing this week? So, I put in a request, just as a quick reminder to everybody, if there's something you'd like me to investigate whilst we go through this wine journey that we're all going on together, and it can be anything, then let me know. I'm collecting a list of these, and then we can explore these as we go through them. So I know there's been a request around GraphQL. I think GraphQL is super cool, so that's definitely going to happen soon. I'm just going to think of an example of where we can use it. I'm quite keen myself, so I come from a .NET background. Well, I haven't coded for a little while, but originally that's what the space I was working in. So I'm quite keen to see, can we put something together in the .NET space, maybe something around .NET Core, see what that looks like. And there's so many things. NLP, there's an opportunity to have a play with that. A bunch of stat stuff we can do, a bunch of graph data science stuff we can do, loads of stuff. So if there's something in particular you want us to have a look at one week or a series of weeks, because some of these might be quite meaty projects, let me know and then we'll do that. So what I thought we'd do this week is let's have a look at where we've got to. So I did put an ask out if anybody fancies any particular topic, so it hasn't. So I thought, well, you know what, we've been doing this for a number of weeks, so let's revisit what we've done so far and what's worked well, what's not worked so well, what have we learnt, and yeah, let's do that. So maybe it's the shortest session today, so that's what we're going to do. And absolutely, as we're going through the stuff, if you go, hang on a minute, I want to ask a particular question, drop it in the chat, let's have a look. Let's have a bit of fun with this as well. So I know we may actually have a question that somebody asked a couple of weeks ago, so maybe we'll have a go at that as well. So let's get cracking. So what I'm going to do is let's start off with having a look at the data model, and then we're going to remind ourselves about the journey, what happened, how we've, where we got to, how far we've got, and so forth. So let's do a bit of a reminder on that side. So first of all, let's have a look at the database schema. So this is where we're up to so far. Where was I recently? Because this is week 13, obviously unlucky for some. I'm not like that, but I'm just trying to remember, I was somewhere recently with my husband, and we were somewhere and he'd spotted there wasn't a number 13. And I'm just, for life of me, I can't remember where we were. We were on holiday. Very recently, we were in Lyme Regis, which is very cool. So for those of you, if you like your fossils, go to Lyme Regis. It's on the Jurassic coast, and there are ammonites everywhere. Super cool place. But anyway, I digress. I think it may have been it was the beach huts. So, yeah. So you have this thing in the UK where a lot of the seaside towns that we have these things called beach huts. So do have a look on your favourite search engine. But they're quite small. They're roughly about 1.5 metres by about 2 metres. So they're super, super small. And they're really popular. I mean, you can't get these things for love nor money. I mean, they're sort of typically made out of wood, and they cost like easily over £30,000 if you want to buy one. But they're like sort of right on the beach, and they're really good for you have your chair. Maybe you have a few bits and pieces like your favourite books, and maybe something to make your drinks with, and people sitting there by the beach. But yes, we were looking at the numbers, and they skipped the number 13. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. But anyway, this is week 13, so let's have a look at where we've got to so far. So here is the data we've got loaded into the graph database, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on. So nice bit of revision, as it were, to see where we are, where we've got to, and things we've got to do, and there is a lot of stuff to do. But it's all good, it's all an exciting adventure. So let's just put some nice colours in some of these nodes that we've not yet coloured up. So province, points, let's give points a colour. Let's give taster, so if we go to taste, oh, let's expand these out. Oh, it's just the taster node that hasn't got colour yet, so I know some of these are repeating, but needs must. Okay, right, so let's have a, oh, and price, oh sorry, price, that's the exciting bit, isn't it? How much we're actually paying for this beverage. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So we've got wine, so talking a little bit about modelling. Typically your data model is going to be determined by what kinds of questions you're looking to answer. And whilst we didn't have concrete questions at the start of this journey, it was clear very quickly that wine was going to be the centre of our universe. So what do I mean by centre of the universe? What you will spot when you're putting together a data model based on the question you're looking to ask or the subject of importance of your data, so in this example it's wine, you'll spot that tends to gravitate into the middle of your data model, and you'll have lots of relationships coming off of that node. So that's what I mean by centre of the universe. So here, unsurprisingly, we've got a data set of wine. Wine is the centre of our universe here. And we've got a number of things coming off, and we've got quite a reified data models. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we have a number of things coming off of wine, and they've become nodes in their own right. So we don't have a list of properties. So you see here wine, and in wine we've got a property called title. So title is the name of that wine. So for example, and this is where I'm going to fall apart of coming up with a sensible name, but let's say the something Chateau 2017 Bordeaux style red, for example. So that's the title. And maybe we could have had some other properties there. We could have had the year in there. So you notice we've got year node. Maybe I could have included description there. We may have had the price. And for those of you who've been following the series, you will have remembered, or you will recall, and we'll have a look in the previous postings, that we had price as a property on wine. And last week, the week we actually brought in the price data and started doing something with it, we thought it probably made sense for it to be a node in its own right. So we've pulled that property out and we've turned it into a node. And a really, really common question that gets asked about modelling for the graph, and how do you decide that something's going to be a node? How do you decide something's going to be a relationship? How do you decide something's going to be a label, a property, and so forth? And a lot of this is going to be driven behind what kinds of questions you're looking to ask, and also sort of a level of pragmatism around how are you going to use your data. And the beautiful thing about when we work with graphs is that it's not a problem to refactor it. So we can make changes, it's not an issue, and because our schema, it's schema on write, so when we're loading data in, that's going to dictate, as far as the database is concerned, what the data model looks like. So that's not a problem. So we'll talk a little bit about decisions we've made. So we'll go through each of the weeks we've done so far, and we can talk about some of the decisions that were made. So we've got wine, we've got the year of the wine. So this was when we did some processing, so we'll talk about that in a bit. The wine group, we'll touch on that as well. So wine group and year are basically from the wine title. So when we have this data set, so we have something like 120,000 wines. And unfortunately, out of the many, many fields that we had in our data, the one we did not have was the year of the wine. So the year of the wine was a part of the wine title. So we did a piece of work where we extracted out the year for that wine, and in this concept of wine group. And wine group is basically the wine title without the year. So for example, if we had Portuguese red blend 2017, Portuguese red blend 2018, Portuguese red blend 2019, wine group would be Portuguese red, and then we've got those 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019 as separate things. And that's really useful because now we can ask some interesting questions around wine ratings to year, for example, or blends to year. So maybe we can get some interesting information out of that. Wine also has a description, so this is the thing that talks about, the bouquet of the wine. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? where did it come from, that kind of thing. And what we discovered as well as part of our journey is in there we can do a bunch of things. So if we, and this is still work in progress for those of you who've been watching, with this description, we can tokenize that, and if we can get rid of all the verbs and things like that, then we're left with a bunch of things such as the aroma smells. So cherry, I think we had chive was one. That's clove, not chive. A wine smelling like chives is a bit scary, but cherry, cloves, berries, apple, and so forth. But we also had the actual grape varieties, and for those of you who recall, because we did have a column there which was variety, which tells us the grape variety of the wine, but the third and fourth most popular wine variety was red blend, and it didn't tell us more, and the red blend could consist of many things. So we did a piece where we used the variety to generate some reference data to then dig out the grape varieties and description to then tell us what the red blends were. Price we did last week, so that's where we're talking about, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we had the taster, so the person who was tasting that wine and providing a review, and the number of points that they gave it. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the modelling decisions we made there to summarise that. And then we've got designation, which we discovered didn't tell us anything particularly useful, so we just ignored that. And the thing that we still haven't really done a huge amount of work behind is a wine coming from a winery being part of a province, and a province coming from a country. And the significance behind this is, you remember we had more than one province, and we had another set of things as well to try and figure out how we fit them in. So we haven't done that piece of work yet. So that's where we are at the moment. So let's revisit what's happened so far. And again, if you've got any questions, drop them in the chat, please do. So, one moment, please, whilst I just quickly check something. So, what we have got. So, if you remember, the first week of this adventure, we explored the data set, and I think some of you who've been watching from the start or watched some of the catch-up videos, I was super excited about this data set because we had a lot of really interesting information here. So we had, for example, we had obviously the country, description, designation. So this was just a bit of the title, so that's why we ruled out the points, the price. And we have some really expensive wines in our selection of data here. Province, so where did it come from? And we have a number of regions which we haven't yet figured out what we're going to do with those. We've got the taster name, the Twitter handle. Oh, I did too stalky. I was wondering whether we can do something with that on Twitter and have a look at how many cross followers they've got, but that might be a bit too stalky, so maybe we won't do that. Variety, winery, and so forth. So this data, and I remember talking about why I was so excited about this data and the kind of cool things we could do with this. And we had an initial stab at, well, we've kind of got some rough ideas, the kinds of questions we're going to ask of our data. So we thought, well, let's have a go. So this was our initial data model. And some of the sharp eye amongst you may have spotted the data model that I just showed you now, we've got in a database, and what we started off with are quite different. So what have we got here? So originally we thought, well, yeah, we've got wine, and it probably makes sense to have the description on the wine and the price for the wine. So here we go. So we've got our property graph model, and we've got this thing, and we did a couple of things. So we said, well, variety probably makes sense to have it as a separate node. And the rationale behind that is if we want to find all of the wines that have got the same variety, then we just we pivot via that variety node, and we can pull all the wines that have got the same variety. Same idea with the winery. It probably made sense to pull out the winery node because we can find out, which wineries have got, most number of wines, which are popular, and that kind of thing. And then we had, I'm going to stick with the easy ones for now. The other easy one we had was the taster. So the person who tasted the wine and gave so they're the taster who's given a description for the wine, and they also gave it a score. And we thought, well, it probably makes sense to have taste as a separate node because a taster is likely to taste more than one wine. And we thought it probably made sense to put the points, the review points that test to go for the wine as a property on that relationship. And then we had this really big messy thing, and we still haven't resolved it. And maybe next week or the week after, we'll have a think about what we're going to do with this big lump of question mark, which is what is the relationship for wine between region, between province, between country. And the interesting here is because is region part of province? Is province part of region? Not sure yet. We're not sure how those things connect together. So we're going to have to do a bit of digging about with the data to try and figure that out. So that was our original point. And then what did we do? So we started off little by little. So the first thing we did was we imported the winery. Oh yes, so we didn't even import the wine in the first week 2. So here we just imported the winery, the province and the country, and this allowed us to ask questions such as, which provinces had the most wineries, which country had the most wineries, which countries had the most featured provinces, that kind of thing. So we're able to do that, and we talked about dealing with null values because with our data set we have some empty columns, and that's fine. So we still need to do something because otherwise the database will come back at us when we're loading the data and go, you've provided a null value, I need something. Because nulls as a concept don't exist within Neo4j. You don't need to capture a null. If you don't have a value for something, you don't need to put little blank space in it. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. So we talked about dealing with the nulls and we asked some questions. So then we moved into week 2 and we added some more data. So originally we started off with winery, province and country. And the next stage, what we've done here is we have loaded in our wine. So the actual wine with the title and the description, the designation. So we talked about designation, which turned out wasn't particularly useful information. We discovered that later on. The variety, so what grape did that wine consist of? And the taster. And the one thing to mention here is whilst we do mention the points from taster, we didn't import it just yet because we weren't ready to answer any questions. So this is what we did, and we brought that data in. And again, we're dealing with nulls where we need to deal with nulls. You'll notice we split out our load CSV queries. That's to make it efficient and we avoid eager queries. Eager queries. So we got that going on then. So we did all that good stuff. And then we could start to ask interesting questions. So we did the prolific taster. So, and the one thing I completely forgot for us to do to have a look at the count, and I'd obviously forgotten about this, but a couple of weeks ago we did have Roger who tasted something like 24,000 wines. But obviously, I don't know what happened here. I've obviously forgotten about Roger when we did this query. But here we go. So we were looking at the most prolific wine taster. And what we did as well is we had a look at the varieties that contained red. And the reason why we did this was when we did a little quick look at the query, we discovered that we had a lot of red blends. We had red blend, Portuguese red blend, Bordeaux style red blend. So it's just to give us a hint of how many of those reds were coming up. And then we came to week 3, where I think it dawned on us that we didn't have that year data. And why do we care about the year data? And the reason why we care is you can have a wine from exactly the same winery with exactly the same variety of grape and so forth, but the tastes can differ over different years, and there's going to be a variety of factors behind that. You'll have things like variation in the weather is going to impact it. Maybe something happened and the grapes had to be picked sooner or later, so maybe something happened around that. You have certain situations where certain vineyards, what they will do is if they don't produce enough grapes on their vineyard, then they'll bring the grapes in from another country or a different region. That's going to impact the taste. You're going to have lots of different things, and maybe it will be interesting to see how those variations happen with the wine. Equally, maybe we can do interesting things where if we do know something about the weather, then we're going to know that actually we want to know about wines from a certain year from a certain region because we know they're all going to have a similar taste, or we hope there is. So there's a lot of value about why we want to pull the year out. And then we had this. So we had another opportunity where we think about revising the data model. So whereas previously we were just bringing data in, what we have here is trying to make a decision about what do we want to do with year. So what does this look like? And as you can see here, we're thinking about, well, do we have wine that's in a wine group and then have the year come off that? Or do we want... So this is something that happened, and we look like this. So this is what we were originally thinking. So remember, if we had a wine with the title of Portuguese Red, Portuguese Table Red 2015 as an example, then our wine group would be Portuguese Red Table Wine, and then our year would be 2015. So I think originally we were thinking about doing something like this, and I believe actually no, we don't do this. And I'm just going to quickly recall what was the rationale behind splitting it. Yes. So the reason why we didn't go down this route of having wine group then year is just from a query perspective. So if you think about us comparing wines from the same year, so obviously we're all going to go to the same year node, and the reason why we have the year as a node rather than as a property on the wine, because if you think about it, we're going to have a limited range of years. So we did some data cleaning where we're, you'll see future on, where we were trying to figure out the the number of years that we're working with, and we had a range of around, I think, 60 different years. Now, bearing in mind we have 120,000 wines, do we really want to look up 120 wine nodes to find out which have matching years? Or does it make more sense to find one of the 50 year nodes that represent the year for the wine and then connect that to the wine? And that makes more sense, because if you think about it, now we're only having to filter 50 year nodes and then traverse a relationship to the relevant wines, rather than having to search through, scan through the property of 120,000 wines. So this is the kinds of things you think about as you have better understanding of what questions you're looking to ask of your data and how you further iterate that. So that's why we've pulled out the year, and that made sense. And another reason, and this could change. There's, there will be pros and cons to a different approach. But the reason why I decided to go down this route, we've got the wine group, so that will be the Portuguese Table Red, and then the year 2015 separately, rather than as an extension of it, is that we cut down the number of traversals if you were trying to compare two wines based on year. So we don't have to go through wine group to figure out the year. So that's just cutting down the complexity of our query, because I think at the time I couldn't think of a good reason why we would want to go via the wine group and then stop back again. So that's the rationale behind that, but maybe it's the wrong rationale. We can update the model later, but that's not a problem. So that's where we got to there. So that was the piece of work where we were figuring out what's a sensible data model. Then we had a fun series of, I think, 2 to 3 weeks of actually trying to extract the year out of the title. And I appreciate there's lots of different tools that we can use to do this, but I think the fun is to practice our cipher skills and using APOC to help us do that within the database. I thought, let's go that route. So I'm not going to go into huge detail about the different trials and tribulations that we had. But the interesting thing to bear in mind here is we used APOC to help us do this. So we used regular expressions to help with this. And just as an example, as you can see here, here's the example of here's the wine title. And then you can see that the group here, test. So this is us trying to create our wine group. So remember we had that node of wine group. That's what's going on here. And we had lots of fun with this, because what we discovered was some wines had 2 years in them, and the year could be like a branding. So like, I don't know, classic, I'm going to come up with a silly example, but let's say Portuguese Table Red 2015 Ested 1909 or something like that. So we could end up with 2 years in there. So that made it quite interesting, because we're now going, well, which year which one's the right year? Now, common sense would dictate it's probably not going to be the 1909, it's not going to be the year of our wine, because we've got one that's 2015 and that's the sensible wine. The kicker here was there were some wines that had 2020 in them, which absolutely we can have wines from 2020, but this data set was from about 2-3 years ago, so again that's another branding year that's been used. So we had a bit of fun around this. So here we looked at the principles that we could use to pull that information out. So this was painful, where we loaded the data, I thought brilliant, we've got a way of doing this, and then we had to delete everything the following week and do it again, but that's cool. So we did this, we had a look where we talked through this. So we had some challenges that we discovered. So here we go, this is what we talked about. So we had branding years, so we had to do something about that. Some wines, yeah, so we talked about some wines. So some wines just had the branding year, so like Port had a branding year in there. And again, if it's a fancy port, then absolutely you're probably going to have a year for that. If it's something that you've paid about $15-20 for a bottle, it's going to be a branding year more likely. So we had something like that. So we had some ones that had 2 years, the actual year of the wine and the branding year. Some wines have no year, so many of the champagnes that were reviewed didn't have a year. So we don't always have a year for all the wines. So what we did was we did some interrogation of the data, and first thing we tried to figure out was what was a sensible range of years for the wine. And we did this by looking at the price of the wine as well as the year. So for example, if a wine has got, the year is 1975, for example, but it costs $15 a bottle, that's probably a branding year. That's not a sensible year, because I would expect, you think about the cost behind putting down wine. So, when you have to sort of put it in specially controlled conditions and manage the temperature and the humidity and all that stuff to stop the wine from going, sort of drying out or ruining the cork and that kind of thing. That's not a cheap process. So if we see a wine that's got a year of 1975 and it costs $2,000, and I can well believe that that's probably a year. So this is where we're using business rules. So we've made an assumption about some of the business rules here. So we made an assumption about any years. So any year has to be 1970 to 2017. So anything that didn't fall within that range, we just assumed it was a branding year, and we sort of got rid of that. Any wines with just a branding year or no year, we just tagged that as no year. So that's a common approach we've used for everything. So no country, no year, no taster, etc. And what else did we say? Oh yes, and if there was 2 years in the bottle and both years fitted within our range, then we went for the first year that appeared, because what we observed was typically the wine. The first year tended to be the year of the wine, and then the second year was the branding year. So here are all our business rules. So we did this, and I think we only had, this kind of worked for most of our data. So we finally got it done. We were there. Week 5. That was an exciting week. Well, it was for me, because we finally got that stuff sorted. And what we did, for week 5 was we applied all of our knowledge, we applied our business rules, and we were able to create the wine group. So that's the title without the year, and we were able to create the actual year itself, and to be able to do something with that. So that's super exciting. So that was a great year, and then we were able to ask some interesting questions. So we were able to ask, what was the most popular year? So we've got an example here where I'm going to pick the awesome chart we've got here. So we saw things like, what was the most popular wine we had in our data set. So bearing in mind that it was up to 2017, so like 2012 had the most number of wines that we had there, which kind of makes sense, because if you have a lot of reds and things, you tend to have that lag of about 4 or 5 years, for your most commonly drunk wines. So that was pretty cool. So we did that, and now we can do all these year questions. So that was a great week. And oh yes, we also discovered, fortunately, our wine set did have some duplication in there. So I did a bit of Excel magic, as in I just removed duplicates, bit of secret sourcing, and then I removed the duplicates, and then we just reloaded the data. But again, that's pretty quick. So we got rid of those duplicates, and that was sorted. And we're also very clean. So remember, we had the wine group, so the Portuguese table reds, and then the year 2015. So one of the questions we wanted to know was which wine group had the most number of years. So I don't know if this is it looks like the deduplicated data. Wonderful. So as an example here, can I zoom this out? Make it, no, it's cut. I apologise that I've chopped off a bit on the side. But you can see, for example, here this was the most popular wine group. So this Sebastianti Cherry Block Cabernet Sauvignon from Sonoma Valley. And you can see all of the years there. And that's really cool. So actually, I'm going to take a note of that. Let's go find out what the ratings were. So now we've got the year data, we've got the group data, and we've got rating data, and we've got price data. So actually a really fun one. So this is really good looking through this. A fun question I want to ask is for example, this Sebastiani wine, did the price change over the time? And maybe it does, because we don't know when these reviews were collected. But also, what were the ratings? So did the ratings stay predominantly the same? So a fun bit thing is we can do like the max min rating, the average, and what was the standard deviation from there. So that should be a bit of fun. Oh yeah, so now we've got that. That's a fun question I'm going to ask. So we did that, and that was great and brilliant. So we saw as well we could do from the wineries as well, where we wanted to find out for each winery. And again, this was ordered by... Oh, I keep truncating all these images. I do apologise. Maybe go back to the non-truncated one. But you can see here, for example, where we're looking at the winery and seeing how many wines per year they were producing. So we can ask a lot of interesting questions now with that year data. And, week 6. Week 6 was a fun week. They're all fun weeks. What we did in week 6. So we first off wanted to find out what was designation all about. And we had a look at designation, and then we realised it was part of the title, so wasn't particularly interesting. So we thought, well, let's go and have a look at variety. And variety was the grape data. And I thought, well, Shiraz is a variety. And something that we discovered when we looked at the query to pull back all of the grapes that all of the wines that had Shiraz in there is that, there is a lot of Shiraz in there, and we've got a lot of wine blends mixed in there. So we thought, well, what probably makes sense is we want to find some kind of way of deduplicating our data. So what we did there is we used the approach which I mentioned in my BBC Good Food blog post. And a really good way, certainly as a starter for 10, to try and remove duplicate entities in your data, especially when you've got something like this, is first of all to tokenise your data. So this is where, let's take something like the Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot Shiraz as an example there. So we've got 3 wine varieties in there. We've got Cabernet Sauvignon, we've got Merlot, we've got Shiraz. And it could easily happen that we have a Shiraz Merlot Cabernet Sauvignon or a Merlot Shiraz Cabernet Sauvignon. The ordering can change, and more often than not, that's based on what's the biggest proportion of the grape down to the lowest proportion of the grape. So these things can move around, but we might not necessarily care about the proportion. But what we do care about is finding all the wines that say have all 3 of these grapes in there. So we've got some tricks in our, tricks we can pull out the hat to tackle this. So the first thing we can do is we can tokenise these words. So for here, we can do a split on the hyphen. So this will give us Cabernet Sauvignon as a node, we'll have a Merlot as a node, and we'll have a Shiraz as a node. And what we can do with this is we say that all 3 of these come off this particular variety node that has Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Shiraz. And then we do the same approach in all of the varieties, and anything when we tokenise that has Shiraz in it, we're going to create a relationship to that variety, the new node, variety name node that we've created that has Shiraz. And we keep doing that. Now immediately we've fixed the ordering problem, by tokenising it. So straight away, anything that has any variety of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Shiraz in whatever order, we can immediately go, all of those are the same for the purposes of what has the same grip. So we can immediately do that. And we can use this approach as well for use things like phonics and fuzzy matching and all of this good stuff to try and reduce those down. And that's what we discussed in this post about cleaning that up. And we talk about using things like Levenstein similarity to figure out words that are similar, and that helps us deal with plurals and typos and that kind of thing. So we've got a lot of interesting things around there. And that effectively left us to refactor the graph yet again. And so what we've got now is we had our variety. So that was what we originally had. So that was our Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Shiraz. And we now have variety name. And variety name is, the tokenized, cleaned up grape variety, which allows us now to very easily find out, things like which wines have all got the same grape variety, or which wines contain a grape variety, because maybe we discover we really like any wine that has Shiraz in it, and we like the blends, we like the pure Shiraz. That allows us to do that. And this is really powerful because this means we can do all sorts of interesting recommendation questions based on grape variety. So that was an exciting week. And it got more exciting because something we discovered, so we did that in week 6, that was the tokenizing. And then we thought, well, okay, let's do the same thing with description. So description was, let's bring up the new model for that. I'm just going to close some of these so we don't have a crowded tab. Oh, don't need to do that. And we had the same thing with description. So remember, description was the thing that tells you information about the wine. So the wine has aromas of cherries, the wine has this variety of grapes, the wine tastes like this, it has hints of something else, it was found in this region. There are a lot of interesting information. So this is the information that the taster has provided about the wine. And the interesting thing there is we can't do much with the description as is. It's a block of text. It's a block of, it's unstructured data to some extent. So we can't do much with it as is. But there's a lot of fun things we can do if we tokenize that text. So again, similar process, we split by spaces, and there's lots of other interesting irregularities we have to figure out to split. So it's still kind of work in process, but we're getting there. Work in progress. But what we can do is if we split it out and we can clean that text up, and this is where when we do this, and I really want to do this, where we start thinking about using maybe some NLP to help us out with this, is if we take that text and we strip out the things that we're not interested in. So we're not really interested in any verbs yet. They're probably going to be super important in the future. So, when we want to have a look at how something smells versus something tastes. But for now, if we can strip out all of the stop words, so stop words are things like and, the, at, this, etc. So get rid of all of those. If we can get rid of all the verbs, and then all we should be left with should be either descriptive words about aroma, smell, or appearance, or the grape variety. Because something we spotted, and this is why week 8 was so exciting, was we had grape variety, and a lot of grape variety here for some wines would be red blend. And we're like, well, red blend of what? Because there could be many things in the red blend. But when we went off and had a look at the description for the wine that said red blend, in the description it would go, this Bordeaux style red blend contains Cabernet Sauvignon and, Shiraz and, a few other grape varieties in there. And you'd be like, well, hang on a minute, you've mentioned that, it's mentioned in the description, but we don't have it in the variety. And the really cool thing, because we've tokenized and, dealt with the stuff in variety name, what we can now do is cross-map, treat variety name as a set of reference data. So reference data is a finite list of terms that don't tend to change very often. So think like country names could be that, or salutations like Mr, Ms, Doctor, Lord, so forth. So it's a fairly static set of data that doesn't change very often. And the nice thing is, we've got 120,000 wines in this data set. And whilst a lot of them have things like red blend, white blend, there's also a lot of them which is just the grape on its own. So when we do that cleanup, we now have a set of reference data which we can now map against description, and we can now figure out what the variety is for red blend. And that's something we've been able to do that by being able to clean up and use the description. And again, same idea with description word. We clean that up and we get things like cherry, apple, cinnamon, clove, and so forth like that. And what we can do now is we can recommend wines based on these attributes. So if you really like a fruity wine, so you like a wine with lots of berries, well, we can do that. We can find that and then suggest other wines. But even more powerfully, let's say you say, well, here's a bunch of wines that I quite like. So, we're going to data. Let's assume you've tried these wines in your data set. You can now have a look at those wines and go, well, I like this wine, and this one. And now we have a bunch of things to figure out, why do you like those wines? Is it because of the variety? So we can go up to the variety node and figure out, are there variety types that you like that are in common? And we can start going, well, you probably want to try these ones. But maybe it's more subtle. Maybe there's something in the tasting profile. So maybe you like the things that have hints of berries. Maybe it was cinnamon. Maybe you never knew it was the combination of cinnamon and vanilla that you really enjoyed. And now we can spot that. So we can start to dig under the surface and figure out, why do you like specific wines? So that was great fun. That was a super discovery. I actually did a talk on Nodes about this as well. I was so excited by this. I might turn the light on in a bit because it's getting a bit dark. Bear with me 1 second. So that was really cool. And so now we're building in more and more information to be able to understand, why do we like a certain wine and how we can recommend stuff. So that's what happened that week. So that was a fun week. And I did a Nodes talk on this, on finding the wine blend gaps. So that was week 8, and that was super fun. Week 7 even. So we did more stuff in week 8. So there is a little issue with the description, and this is something I'm going to take offline and figure out. So I'm still going to do this. It is quite dirty, the data in there. So we have lots of different splitters. So we have two different types of spaces. I didn't realise we can have 2 different types of spaces. Short hyphen, long hyphen, ampersands. There's a lot of things going on in there. So I need to research and figure out a good way of being able to clean that up whilst preserving the nature of the text. So that's something that's in progress. So bear with me, I'm going to do that. And definitely, like I said, we want to use fancy tools to process that text as well. I'm really keen to look at a lot of stuff that my colleague Mark Needham is putting together in NLP stuff. So that was the descriptions. And look at this. There we go. Look, we've got an example of here. We've got the variety, which is red blend. And if we look in the description, it tells us, look, it's Sangiovese and Cabernet Sauvignon. So we used and I've got a more detailed example when I do the Nodes talk of where we can then pull out Sangiovese and Cabernet Sauvignon to show us that. So that was super cool. That was great fun. Week 9, what did we do? Still in description words. We shall skip over that. Yeah, this was disappointing. Right, so the fun stuff. The last 2 weeks prior to this week that we were looking at was adding the rating, the points that the tasters had awarded to the wine, and then asking some questions, and adding the price. So let's have a quick look what we did. So you will be shocked and horrified to hear that we changed the data model yet again. It was worth it though. And so what we did here, and let's talk a little bit about what we did. So originally we were thinking about doing, taster, then we have rates wine, and then wine. And then we had to, we thought about this. We thought, well, hang on a minute. We've got 120,000 wines. So that means you've got 120,000 relationships between taster and a wine, and 120,000 properties on that relationship telling you the points that taster gave that wine. And that's problematic because if we want to do anything interesting around understanding, which wines have got the same rating, or what's the rating profile, what blends get certain ratings and so forth, that means we have to go off and query. So much like what we had previously. That means we have to go off and filter through 120,000 relationships to check that. And then what we did was, we thought, well, actually, what is our rating range? So the maximum points you can award a wine is 100. The minimum points you can award a wine is 0. And we thought, well, actually, maybe we should find out. Oh yes, this was we found out about Roger. Roger, 23,000 wines tasted. Oh my goodness. But anyway, so we had a look. And we've only got 19 different named reviewers, or 20 including no taster. And we had a look actually, and it wasn't even 0 to 0. Like the lowest wine scored 80 points, the highest wine scored 100. So effectively, we are looking at 21 times 20. So we are looking at, and this is where my maths fails me miserably, 400 and, is that the right way around? Yeah, 420 nodes. That's the total number of points nodes we need when we map the reviewer, the wine they had, and what score that wine got. And that's significantly better to just look up 420 nodes than 120,000 relationship properties. That's significantly faster. So what we did was we refactored the graph again. And what we've done is we've pulled out that, remember we had a relationship between wine to taster, so we've split it out a little bit, and what we've said is that a taster gave certain points to a wine, and a wine got those points. And then what that means is we're now collating, so we'll have, so 2 different reviewers could have given the wine 80 points, but that's okay, we have 2 different points nodes connected to those tasters, but they come to the wine. So that means we can very easily find out relationships between wines, the points they scored, and, for example, the grape variety. So we included that in, and then what we did, I had a little bit of fun with this, I think some of the questions we asked was, I think we wanted to find out all the grapes that, all the wines that Roger was reviewing, because he's reviewed a lot. And we had a look at which wines were well rated. So this is where we looked at wines that had a score of 90 and above, and to have a look at what the variety was. So you can see here Pinot Noir. Oh, the image is clipping. So Pinot Noir scored 6,000. Over 6,388 or 6,388 Pinot Noirs got a rating of 90 and above. So that's, a good bit of fun there. And then what we did the following week was we added the price. And again, we did the similar approach, because again, we've got 120,000 bottles of wine, that's 120,000 different prices. And again, we did that query and we had a look at how many different prices did we have. And we've only got 390 different prices, which is quite amazing, because the range we had anything from around, I think $5 was the cheapest wine and $3,700 was the most expensive. But there was only 390 different prices. So again, 320 nodes is better than trying to look up 120,000 relationship properties, or 120,000 properties on a wine node. So we did that same approach again. So we pulled out price from wine. We did that, and we had a look at, so we had a look at which wine. There were some expensive wines. We first had a look at the expensive wines. So we looked at all of the wines that are over $1,000 a bottle and what scores they received. And the really amusing thing here was you can spend $1,000 on a bottle of wine. It doesn't mean it's going to score 100 points. So that was interesting. I mean, I don't think I'd ever spend the amount of money on wine, but there you go. Oh, sorry, it was $3,300. It was $400 cheaper than I thought it was. And then we can do fun things. Well, okay, so let's find out the wines that score 97 and above points and how much they cost. And it turns out, for $35, you can acquire a bottle of wine for $97. And I believe the cheapest bottle of wine that scored 100 points was $80. Special occasion, why not? And then we did things around, now we've got this information in there, we had a look at the tasters and what was the cheapest bottle of wine that they tasted, what was the most expensive, and just looking the average around that score. So you can see the average is pretty much sat at around between $25 and $40. So you're getting a flavour around what's going with that. And then we just had a look as well. Last thing we're going to leave on this recap was having a look at which country had the highest scoring, highest average between the low score and the high score, which was England. Hey, apparently we do good wine. We do good white sparkling wine, I have to say. So there you go. So that was a very quick recap. I thought, maybe it's good to do this quick check-in of what we're doing. So I'm going to leave it there. So I'll give it a couple of moments. If any of you've got any questions, you've seen the recap, and if you've got some questions that you'd like me to ask of this wine data, ask me. Otherwise, I'm going to come up with some questions because I've had this nice refresh of what we've done, and I've got a couple of questions. I mentioned a couple as we were going along, so I will do those questions and we can look at them next week. And again, if you've got something in particular you want to have a look at next week, let me know. Otherwise, I've got some thoughts about what we can look at. So with that, I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.